Yes. Yeah. So yesterday we discussed about the MPP architecture and distribution methods. So in the MPP architecture, as we discussed earlier, the dedicated SQL pool, okay, works on the MPP architecture. So where the data gets the query, the control node takes the query, it divides into some divisions, like 60 divisions, and supplies that query load to all these compute nodes equally. Then compute nodes performs the operation by taking the data from the Azure storage and gives the result back to the control node. Okay, so the data movement from one compute node to another compute node takes place from the with the help of data movement service. Okay, so this is a standard MPP architecture applicable to any technology which is using the MPP like Spark, right? Now in the distribution method, so in the distribution method, whatever the distribution it's happening from control node to compute node, these are all distributions. Okay, query which runs on a single compute node is a distribution. Okay, so how does this distribution happens? That also we discussed. So there are the three types of distributions: hash, round robin, replicated. Okay, so hash in the sense whatever the column you choose, it applies the hash function on top of it. Okay, on top of it for the column, then it divides the distribution to all the compute nodes based on the hash function of that particular column, right? So it's ideal for fact tables, and the large dimension tables are very large, it's ideal. Okay, and we need to make sure that the hash function has good number of distinct values so that it will be passed to each and every computer nodes equally, right? So round robin, what happens? Data distributed evenly. So say suppose 120 rows are there, so then each compute node will have two rows randomly. Okay, so first one goes to here, second one goes here, third, fourth, fifth to 60, then 61th goes to again first node, like that. Okay, but the thing is that, so as the data is spread across the different nodes round robin without any standard mechanism, so whenever you have like whenever you're querying the data and all, it takes so much of time because data movement is there. So that is the reason it's ideal only for the temp table and staging tables. Okay, and replicated table. So replicated, the name itself specifies that, so it's basically used for the small tables, as the data will be cached on each and every node. Okay, that's about the distribution methods we discussed. And let's discuss about index types. So whenever you have index, whenever you create a table, you create an index. Okay, the table type. So what is the index we have? What is the index actually? Index is a structure which will be created along with the table, which improves the performance. Okay, whenever you query the data, right? So we have like clustered column store index, heap, clustered. So we discussed about clustered column store already. Okay, what is the column store? What is a column store?
Index will be created on column.
No, what is column store? In general, I was saying about column store, right? When we were discussing about the Parquet, so we were discussing about
column.
Yeah, so data will be stored in the column wise. So column wise, then it will be compressed. So because of the data is in the column store, while I was discussing the same thing during that Parquet format, the same thing will be here. The data will be compressed and the data will be stored in the column store. That is the reason it gives best query performance whenever you query the data. Okay, the only thing is that we cannot use the columns like varchar max, nvarchar max, varchar var binary max while creating this column store index, and of course not efficient for temp tables for less than 60 million rows. Temp tables and the rows which are there 60 million, in the sense what, each distribution, how many distributions are there in the MPP? 60. So that means each distribution, each node should process at least 1 million rows. Okay, that means 60 million rows totally. So if you have only more than 60 million rows, then you will go for the clustered column index. Does it make sense? Are you getting what I'm trying to say?
Yep.
Yeah. So these are all the tables which we create. Okay, these are the indexes and distribution methods which we use while creating the tables. And heap in the sense, the name itself says no index, nothing. Loads to heaps are faster than index table, and in some cases the subsequent read can be done from cache. So heap in the sense what? No index. So whenever there is no index, the data will be stored, the data will be loaded very fast. You know that, right? You know that, right? So when there is no index, the data will be loaded very fast. Is it so? That's what we do, right? So say suppose we have like whenever you load the data into data warehousing mechanism, what you do usually, you remove all the constraints, indexes, then you load the data, then you reapply the constraints to make the data loading fast. The same thing here, the heap is the one where there will not be any indexes. And clustered, you know what is the regular cluster index? The index stored same order of the data, no compression. Okay, so cluster index, the regular cluster index, where the index is stored, the index will be created whatever the order the data is being stored. Okay, so clustered is more of row storing, and clustered column store index is of column store index. So they have three types: cluster column index store, heap, clustered. Okay, so when we have big data, large data, then we'll go for the cluster column store index. And whenever we have some intermediate table like staging tables, we'll go for the heap. Okay, are you getting what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
Yeah. So those are the distribution methods, how the distribution takes place to each and every node in the MPP. This is the column store index, how the data is being stored for index in the table. These are the two things, the combinations you need to choose when you create a table in the dedicated SQL pool. So you say that create table name with all the columns, then you will choose distribution methods, then the index type, whatever you choose. These will be two properties that you will assign whenever you create a table in the dedicated SQL pool. Okay. So that's about the index. So let us see how do we create a dedicated SQL pool. So in the dedicated SQL pool, how many types, in which places we can create dedicated SQL pool? Dedicated SQL pool, wherever, what are the places that we can create dedicated SQL pool? Either we can create separately. Sorry, I'm not sharing that. Okay. Where does it go? Okay. Yeah. So dedicated SQL pool, where do we create that? Either we can create so we see here dedicated SQL pool, formerly SQL DW. Either we can create separately, right? Or we can create within the Synapse Studio. Okay, I was saying that, right? So if you remember that, where does it come? Let me show you that. If you remember that, either we can create separately or we can create as part of the Synapse Analytics Studio. Okay, Now let us create separately, and also we'll see how do we create there also. There'll be much, there won't be any much difference. So here I'm creating the formal SQL DB dedicated SQL pool. Okay, so same like your SQL. So it takes here, and let me give the full name so that you'll understand. And here server I can give, I can choose the existing server, or I can create a new server, same like SQL. Okay. Okay, now that we created, now performance level. What is the performance level? DW. So did we spoke about DW? What is DWU? In the previous sessions we spoke about what is DW.
Data warehousing
Units. Okay, all the computation power in the dedicated SQL pool will be measured by the unit called data warehousing unit. So data warehousing unit is a combination of memory and CPU. Okay, it doesn't talk about anything related to the storage. Okay, 1 minute. Somebody knocked me. Okay, so data warehousing unit is the unit combination of all the processing power in the dedicated SQL pool. Okay, that you need to remember that. And based on that, based on the whatever the computing power that you're choosing, the processing will be multiplied. Okay, say suppose you are taking 100 DUs, okay, 100 DUs, and say suppose a query is taking like 5 minutes, sorry, 15 minutes. So when I make it to 300 DUs, what happens? It will be computed within the 5 minutes. Okay, it all depends upon the how much DW you choose. Okay, so I'll choose the minimum because I'm not going to perform much transactions on this, and say it's best costly 217 rupees per hour. Now I'll go to networking. I'll say public endpoint, and I'll say allow Azure service and resources to access this server and current IP address. Same like yeah.
We are seeing still the old screen configure performance.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Now?
No, still configure performance screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now? Okay.
Yeah.
So I selected the 200 performance level, and networking, I'll go for networking. I'll say public endpoint here, firewall rules. I will, this I was saying, right? Allow Azure services and resources to access this server, so that whatever the Azure service, wherever I use, like in the Synapse or ADF or Databricks. Okay, so I should be able to access this. So yes, and add current client IP address. You know this, right? So if I do this, what happens? Whatever the IP address from which I'm navigating, this will be added. Otherwise, you need to go to networking. There, firewall settings, you need to explicitly add IP address. I'll go here. And the same way, if you remember that while creating the SQL, you are able to create use this option, right? So whether none means there won't be any database will be created. The blank data will be created. Backup in the sense you can take a backup of existing data warehousing database, then you can create on top of it. Or same thing, you have sample adventure works, which is which you know. So based on the sample that will be created. So I'm interested in the none. Let's see. And collation, I'll choose default, not tags. Then I will create just. Okay. So whatever the compute power you choose, based on that, the cost will be associated. And if you remember that, so how do we query the data in the serverless SQL pool? Which one you will choose? Like say, suppose I have a data, I have a file in the ADLS. I just want to query the data. So how do you do that? You choose which syntax?
Using open rosette.
Open rosette, right? Open rosette you'll choose. But here you cannot use open rosette in the dedicated SQL pool. Okay. So what you need to do, you need to create an external table, then you can query the data. All right. So how do we create external table? What are the list of steps that are associated? Which is very important. So what are the steps we have? We create the master key, right? Do you remember that? We'll create the master key.
And
then we'll
credentials.
then we'll create the database scoped credential. Then we'll create the external data source. Then we'll create the external file format. Then we will create the external table. Okay, so external table is a logical table which points to the data which is available in the ADLS as a storage. Okay, so here also, here we need to create the table, then we need to we can query the data in the dedicated SQL pool. So you should remember that open rosette doesn't work in the dedicated SQL pool. Any doubts in the terminology? We'll discuss anyway. Again, we'll revisit those steps now. So this is about the dedicated SQL pool. Okay. So in the dedicated SQL pool, we'll create actual tables. Okay, actual tables to store the data for your data warehouse or for your data operations. Right. So while creating those tables, and we'll load the data into that, right? So when you create the end product in the table, so what do? You load the data into that, right? So for that loading, so how do you load the data? How do you load the data? Now you have a source. Okay, what is the source here? ADLS. Now you have the target. What is the target over here? What is the target?
Dedicated SQL.
Dedicated SQL. So dedicated SQL pool is the target. Source is what? Our ADLS. Okay. Now I need to get the data from this ADLS. I want to load this data into dedicated SQL. Okay. So how do we load the data? So first what we'll do, we'll create an external table to point to this table, right? That is a normal thing which you know, because you need to query the data. How do you query the data? With the help of external table. Then what happens? Simply take the data from external table and just load the data into final table. That's it. Getting? Are you with me? So how do you load the table in the final table? Create external table. With the help of external table, you just load the data into the target. That's it.
No need to dump into
temporary table in this.
From source extract.
Sorry, can you bit louder?
From source to temp to target.
Yeah, that we are going to do, but I'm saying at high level. So the target will be this only. Say suppose you have a stage, of course you have a staging table, but the staging table also same thing again, it will be there in the dedicated SQL pool only, right? So in the dedicated SQL pool there will be staging mechanism, staging table, then the final table. So what do? Usually you take the data from the source, you load the data into the staging, from the staging to target you'll choose, but the staging and the target both will be in the dedicated SQL pool. So here the primary concern is how do we pick the data from the source? So we pick the data from the source with the help of what? External tables, right? So by the time this gets created, it takes some time to get created. Let us see this.
So here the source is dedicated SQL pool server database, right?
No. Here the source is ADLS. So what is our basic mechanism in the data warehousing? In the data engineering, the source, then the target. The source will be ADLS. In the ADLS, there will be like some zones. Okay. So after transformation, all the zones, there will be a data. Okay. In the data set. In the data file or ADLS storage. From the storage mechanism, you need to pick the data and load the data into your dedicated SQL pool, which is nothing but your data warehouse, right?
With them, I mean, the source is ADLS, or can we have another server? I mean, other on-premises SQL DB or any
Yeah,
other.
you can have anything. You can have anything. Here we are talking about because usually the data will be there in the ADLS. Okay, that is a good that is the mechanism that we use usually in the data engineering. Okay, so that is the reason we are using that. So that's how that's what it has importance. That because of that, the external table concept has been created. Because if you remember the MPP architecture, the data will be stored in the Azure storage, right? The data will be stored in the Azure storage. So that is a typical data engineering architecture.
Like this Synapse supports only Azure data store or external data store?
Only Azure storage. Only Azure storage. But you can create, that is about Azure storage, but in the Synapse, you can load the data again from multiple sources. Like in the, what do you say, in the, you can create an ADF, and in the ADF, you store you take the sync as dedicated SQL pool. Source you will take again, same thing, like you'll take SQL server and everything. Okay, but here we are talking about how do we load the data from ADLS to dedicated SQL pool. So while loading, so what do? These are the list of considerations that you'll do. So where is my data coming from? Is the data set new, or do you receive changes from the existing data sets? How the data is being refreshed, added or replaced? So you need to discuss these things. You need to analyze these things before you before you load the data. Okay, so where is the data is coming from? Whether data is coming from ADLS or where the data is coming from some other application, so you'll use that. Then is the data set new, or do you receive changes from the existing data set? In the sense whether it is incremental load or one time load, you need to verify that. Then how the data is being refreshed, in the sense added or replaced. So with the help of what is being refreshed, and what is the interval the data is being refreshed, and what formats the data is coming in, whether it is Parquet format or CSV format, some other format, real-time data, that we need to use that. And the data is ingestible as it is, or do we need to have any transformations required? Okay, if the transformations required, then what are the considerations that we need to do, that we need to analyze? Should I transfer the data before, prior, or to after loading? That means it's the ELT or ETL that we need to see. How complex the robust does the loading process have to be? Okay, so if the data has so many transformations, then what are the list of steps that you need to take care? Which takes priority, loading or querying analysis? Okay, so whether loading is important, only just load it and leave it, or whether you have complex queries to query the data, So based on, so the loading is important or queuing is very important, which takes the priority. Based on that, you need to design and load the data. Okay, so these are the simple loading goals which you have. So based on that, you will design the tables and your architecture, then you will get the data. Okay, so basically, so usually in the data engineering, in the most of the applications, what happens, the data will be stored in the ADLS. Then from the ADLS, you pick the data, then you transform the data in the curated zone and all. Then you finally load the data into this. So it all depends from the scenario to scenario. Sometimes you will get the data from here using external table. Okay, you will point to the external table, you transform the data and load the data directly. Otherwise, sometimes you'll use Azure Databricks. In the Azure Databricks, you will access those tables, the files, okay, using data frames. Then you will do all the transformations. Then you will load the data into finally to the dedicated SQL pool. Or sometimes the target can be only ADLS. Sometimes the target can be only simple SQL database, Azure SQL database. Okay, it all depends upon how do you design the database based on your requirement. In one of my previous applications, the data target was only in the ADLS only. The source was ADLS, even the target was also ADLS. So just we created some of the external tables and we left it. Okay, we created external table, we left it. That's it. So using external tables, whatever the data we need, just we'll take the data and we analyze the data. That's it. Okay. Sometimes in one of the application, the target was dedicated SQL pool. So we created external table, we performed all the operations and we loaded the data. Okay, in one of my previous application, the storage was in the SQL, not dedicated SQL pool. So when the data was SQL, so in the SQL, we just pick the data, we picked up the data from the ADLS and we did transformations with the help of Databricks. And with the help of Databricks, we transfer data, we loaded the data into the SQL. So it all depends on how much data volume you have and what are the various analytical queries that you are going to perform on the data. Okay, then how do we use further the data, whether your reporting mechanism you are going to use or ML operations you are going to use. It all depends on that. Based on that, you are going to design your architecture. So let us see here whether that got created or not. Okay, it got created. Okay, so here the server name and is a performance level, maintenance schedule it gives. And here you need to remember that you can pass a dedicated SQL pool because it has so many queries, okay, inside, because it goes on performing the data operations on that. Okay, there will be some queries to perform and it's very costly while performing those operations. Okay, when you think that you're not going to perform on any queries, okay, simply you can pause this. Okay, so when you pause this, what happens? There won't be any charge for that amount of time. Okay, so when you're not running any queries and so you want to save the cost, simply what you do, you'll go ahead and pause this. Pause, then you resume. Okay, this is one of the important property that you need to remember. Pausing and implement. All right. And these are all the same thing like which we do in the SQL. All the query activities and all you can do. And same thing in the server name. You can click on, I can connect to this server into SSMS. So let me go to SSMS. Do you have SSMS? Okay.
See, if you don't pause it, I mean, we're not doing any operations, and if you don't pause it, will it still chargeable?
Yes, yes, still it's chargeable. Still it's chargeable, it's costly, yes. Because what does it say? The name itself specifies what? Dedicated SQL pool. Okay, the resource has been dedicated, it goes on charging. Okay, so it's a good practice to good practice to pass it whenever you don't require that. Okay, let me share my SSMS. Where does it gone? Okay. Okay, so here I copied the server name from there. So here it has been connected. Are you able to see?
No.
I did share. Okay. Now?
Yes.
Yeah. So here what I created this one. So what is the server name? Dedicated SQL Pool PCDE. In that, sorry, the server is DS pool server, and this is the database which I've created, dedicated SQL pool database. Okay. Now if you see here, tables will be there here. So these are the general tables. These are the external tables. And here external sources, external data source, external file format. All this I can create here. Okay, as is dedicated SQL pool, you see tables. If it is a serverless SQL pool, you won't see this. You'll see only the external tables. Okay. So this is how we can create the database, and we can create a dedicated SQL pool, and you can connect to in SSMS. Okay. Even the same way you can connect in the Synapse server also. So we have one Synapse workspace existing which you created yesterday. Yes. So here in the Synapse workspace you created already. I'll go here. Shall go manage. So SQL pool. I created one yesterday and I paused it to save the money. So here also I can create 1 second. Where is that? Here I can create the SQL pool. So in the data, we have the SQL database. I can create serverless or dedicated. Okay, create a new dedicated pool, manage pools. So I can create here whatever the SQL pool over here as part of the Synapse Studio. Okay, so in the Synapse, as part of Synapse Studio, I can create or I can create separately, independently outside of Synapse workspace. Okay, but otherwise rest of the things all will be same. There won't be any change. So if you see here SQL pool, this is the one I created. 1 second, I wanted to show you something. So here SQL pool, I can add it. Okay, here I wanted to show 1 second. Yeah. So here you can, here also you can see what is the SQL pool we have. So I click on the SQL pool, so I can resume it. So currently what I did yesterday, I passed this while doing something. Then I can resume this to make this operational. Okay, so either you can create there or you can create here, but the operations will be same. There won't be any difference. Okay, and here when it comes to this data,
If we pause, can we access SQL Server? I mean, can we access that in SSMS?
no, you cannot. You cannot do that. If you see here, so these are the, see this, what is the icon? Icon also will be different. So these are dedicated SQL pool which I've created, and these are the sorry, serverless SQL pool which I have created. It all so these will be icons also will be different. Okay, so that's how you create. And here what we do is, so we connected to this SQL pool, and let us see the what is the database which sorry, what is the server which we have. ADLS we have. Okay, so I created a COVID database here, a COVID folder, and here in the COVID I have COVID tracking Parquet have. Okay, I created something called COVID tracking Parquet. So if you remember that yesterday I was giving one of the data set, right? Do you remember? I gave the link for one of the data sets for COVID. From there I picked up this data, COVID tracking. Did you open that link yesterday? Which I pasted in the WhatsApp. Hello?
Yeah, I tried, but I didn't able to access it.
No, why?
Are you saying about Google Classes?
No, not Google Classes. The other one which I gave that data sets. Data set
that is
link.
on Sunday, right? That is on Sunday.
Sunday, yeah, Sunday. I gave data set link. Yeah. So from there only I picked up this one of the data set COVID tracking Parquet. Okay, there are many data sets which are available in the open source, and after COVID there are tons of data sets we have. So you can pick up any data set and you can run the data. Okay, now COVID tracking data set, I created this. Okay, I just uploaded, nothing I did. Okay, so then, so let us see what I do. I just yesterday night I was doing this exercise. Let me show you that. Let me see where is that gone. So let me share my screen again. Yeah. So if you remember that, yeah, before that, let me show you something else before we go here. Yeah. So what are the data copy methods? So when you have the data from one place to your dedicated SQL pool, okay, what are the different options we have to load the data? Okay, so we have three types of three steps are there. Which use parallel loading. One is polybase, one is copy command, and one is copy data activity. This is very important important topic you need to remember and practice. Okay, so there are three ways to load the data. One is polybase, one is copy command, one is copy data activity. What is copy data activity? What is copy data activity? What is copy data activity? If you remember that is about the Azure Data Factory only, it's saying that. So in the Azure Data Factory, we have copy data activity, right? So using copy data activity, we can copy the data. Okay. Or you have something like copy command. So simply you can say that in copy into from, then you can give the location of this file, then all the data will be copied into this. That's it, nothing else. Then you have polybase. So polybase, what happens? The polybase is also same concept, but here you have list of steps. Then using the list of steps, you get the data and store the data, load the data into the target. So here are three steps: polybase, copy command, copy data activity. Okay, copy data activity we have already seen, but we'll revisit to store the data into the dedicated SQL pool as well, and we'll see what is polybase today. Okay, and what is the advantage of this polybase and copy command? And we have bulk insert also, right? But bulk insert also we have parallel. Then what is the advantage of this polybase and copy command? Why these are important, and how does this makes the data loading faster? Because when we use polybase, when you use copy activity, okay, for loading, here we are just loading the data, there won't be any concept of control load. Okay, the data will be segregated. Okay, and the target table, we already mentioned how the distribution mechanism would be there, how the indexing there. So based on that, directly it will load the data using this compute nodes. Getting? So only compute nodes performs activity while loading the data, and it doesn't go with the control node where the data control node takes the data, it distributes along the compute node, then the data gets loaded. No, there is no need of that. So that directly compute node takes the charge and load the data over here. Getting? So that's how the data becomes faster. Okay, so even it's it's related to the real time even in interview question as well. Which one takes which option you would choose to load the data into the dedicated SQL pool and why? Okay, otherwise what is the difference between bulk insert and polybase? And when you have 3-4 options, polybase and SSIS, or you have like sorry, not SSIS, you have polybase and yeah, copy or bulk insert, which options you would choose and why? Okay, so these are the options. So that there is so these are the important loading techniques that you need to remember. Sir, somebody asking something?
CETAs different from that is
Yes, yes. No, yeah, I will talk about it. I even listed down in the next slide. Okay, so you have polybase, copy command, and copy data activity. You will choose one option, then you load the data. Okay, then in the polybase, what are the different steps that you need to create to load the data? See here, you know all these things actually. Create master key, create DB scoped credential, create external data source, create external table, then load the data. If you remember that, if you remember the previous session, I was talking about these steps to create external table. Do you remember this? So what are the list of steps to create external table? I was keep on saying that these are the 4 steps you to create external table. Then the final will be very easy, nothing, only extending this. Then what you do, you create the actual table, then you load the data. That's it. Okay, does it make sense? Does it make sense? Do you got what I'm trying to say? These are the list of steps that you do to create external table anyway. As you know, the only list of steps would be just to you load the data into the target from the external table. Okay, now while loading the data into the external table, into the dedicated SQL pool, there are again 2 steps are there. It's very easy. So in the live about polybase, live about the data warehousing, live about the Azure. When you consider the data, when you consider simple syntax in your SQL server, okay, in how many ways you can create the tables and load the data? Say suppose I told you that source is EMP source, target is EMP target. Okay, source is EMP source, target is EMP target. I tell you to load the data from EMP source to EMP target. EMP target is not yet created. So what are the 2 ways you have to do this process? Live about SQL, live about this Synapse and data warehousing at all. So what are the list? What are the simple things that you do? What do you do? I tell you that there is something called EMP target, EMP source. I want you to create EMP target and load the data from the EMP source. What do you do? I'm asking generic question, not particular to anything. Suppose I am taking interview to you and asking about the questions from the on-premise environment. I have asked this question. So what is the process?
load the data from source.
No, the table is not yet created. So what do you do? I'm asking simple question. You create the table, right? First you create the table or not? Hello?
Yes, first we create a table.
You create the table, you do what?
Correct.
Insert into you do.
Correct.
Okay. Otherwise, what you can do, you can create the table. Okay, then create as you can do and load the data over there. Okay, do you have create as? But you can create the same structure, like select star into you do, right? Select star into the table, target table name from the table. Let me show you that. I'm sure you might have worked on this, but so you have what is this? You have source, EMP source, EMP target. Okay, what you do? Create table EMP target, then insert into table, insert into EMP target, then select star from EMP source. This is the one step you do. What is the other step you do? Select star into EMP target from EMP source. Do you know this or not? Don't say you don't know this. What happens when I do this? What happens?
From EMP,
What happens, man?
EMP target from EMP.
EMP target table will be created here. On the fly, EMP target table will be created with the same structure of EMP source, and the data will be copied from EMP source to EMP target. This is just SQL. You should know this. If you don't know this, then it's surprise for me. You never practiced this? You never did this?
Yes.
You might have done this. It's very simple one, which we use even before cloud and all, right? In on-premise, you do so many times this one, right? So what happens? Select star into EMP target from. So this is basic interview question. Not even interview question, it's a basic thing in the SQL. So what happens? A target will be created, a table will be created with the same structure of the from table class, and the data will be loaded over here. Okay, same like here also in the Synapse. What you can do is you can create first you can create the table. Okay, then you insert the data. Okay, otherwise what you can do, you have something called sit as, create as. Otherwise you can have sit as create table as. So what happens? On the fly, the table will be created, then the data will be copied over here. Okay, otherwise you can create the table, then insert into, you can do. So these are the two loading patterns, create the table patterns. Okay, so at high level, going back to Polybase, these are the steps we have. Create the master key, create DB scoped credential, create external data source, create external table. These are the steps already you know. Okay, there is no confusion in this. Okay, and after this, what do? You load the data into this now. Okay, now see here. So these are all the ones which we already created earlier for the particular source, because I am taking still the same source I am taking here. What is the source I am taking here? The same source, if you remember the source which we have in this. Let me share that screen. Where is it gone? The same source I'm taking, same Azure Data Lake storage, whatever I have, the same store I'm taking, for which we created external data source and all. Okay, but those are specific to database. So I'm trying to create again now. So here what I'm doing here, I'm creating create master key encrypted by password. I'm creating. Okay, so first I created what? Master key. So what does it do? Whatever the secret I am creating in the credential, that will be encrypted with the help of the master key. Okay, then what I do? Database scoped credential I create with the SAS key. So where is the SAS? You know, so yesterday I showed you that. Go to architecture, go to the storage account, and click. When you click on keys, you'll find the secrets. Okay, so here what I'm doing, create database scoped credential, which we have already did yesterday. So then I'm creating this in this particular database. Okay, so once you create the credential, then what you do? You create the external data source. In the sense, what exactly the data source, what is the location that you need to point out with the help of this credential. This credential gives the access to that storage location, storage account. Within the storage account, you need to create a data source mentioning this credential. So you will be using this data source to get the data. Now I'll do this. Now that has been created. Now simple one, file format. I'll create the file format, create external file format, Parquet, or you can use CSV, or you can use JSON. Now I'm interested in this. Okay. Now created the external table. So what are the external table properties have? While creating external table, what are the options you need to choose? Location, data source, file format. Location in the sense the exact file, the exact storage file which you have. Okay, and the data source which you have created pointing to that particular location, complete location. Then the file format which you have already created. Any confusion in this? Are you with me? Hello?
So what is the reject value is equal to?
Yeah, I'll talk about it. So when I say reject value 0, if there is any compatibility issue with any of the data, okay, then the data will not be copied. The data will not be selected. It will be rejected. While loading the data from external table to another table, if there is any compatibility issue, the data will be, the loading process will be errored out. Okay, I'm taking 0. That means if I say 1, so 1 row will be ignored. If I say 10, 10 rows will be ignored with errors. Okay, so the data loading will not be fail. Here I'm saying reject value 0. That means there should not be any row which has compatibility issue with the data type. Okay, and this is optional value. Reject value is optional property. Even you can create even without reject value also. And these are the some of the properties, some of the columns which I selected and try to see from the storage account. These 3 columns I created. Now I created external table which points to this location. It has like 10 to 15 columns, but I'm interested only 3 columns. Now see here, I created a column table here. It is gone. Okay. So which has these values over here. Okay. So where is this value? Where is this data? This value is still in the storage account only. Still it has a storage account. Okay. Now, as I was saying, now you can create the table and copy into the table. Okay. So here what I will do is, okay, now I'll create table. What is the table you have? It's the table COVID target. Give me a minute. I created yesterday with another database. Okay, I just passed it. That's fine. So here what I will do, I'll create the table of COVID target. I'll create the columns. Okay, so here with So what are the options we need to use for option? What are the options you need to give? Distribution option and as well as the column store index you need to give. So here I will say the small column. So what is the distribution I can choose? We have hash and round robin. So the default options will be round robin here. There is option here with distribution round robin clustered column store index. Okay, so what are the two properties when you create the table into the target into the Azure so dedicated SQL pool? Distribution method, which we spoke about, and then the index type, cluster column to index or heap. Okay, that you need to cluster column index you have. And when you create the table into the external table, you need to specify the location, data source, file format. When you say actual table, then you'll choose this. Okay. Round robin, the property is different. So, 1 minute. Syntax is correct only. We remove this and create. Okay, let me check this round robin. I think I misspelled it. So when you don't give any option, what happens? It will take the round robin distribution method. Otherwise, you can give the distribution method specifically. Now the COVID target is inserted. So what you can do is insert into COVID target. Okay, then the data will be created. Otherwise, what you can do is, otherwise, one more options we have, create sit as options here. So we have create table with option as, then you can give the actual select statement that we'll see tomorrow. Okay, so there are two, these options will be there. So you can create the table, then you can insert the table directly from the select command. Okay, any doubts so far?
Like you mentioned that by default it will take round robin.
Round robin, yes.
Is there any query to check which distribution methods are?
Sorry.
Is there any query or we can check from our end which distribution method it has opted for?
Yeah. So we have like system tables, like in the SQL, you have system tables. We have system tables. I will give you that. So using that, you can see how many distribution it choose. So even we can see how many, so 60 distributions are there, right? So even we can see those 60 distributions and how each distribution is taking the load. That also we can see. We'll discuss that. I'll provide that query. I have copied somewhere. I'll show you that. So we can see the distribution methods and all. Now,
save this like yesterday.
Yeah.
Share it in.
Yes. I'll share that. Now here, if you see here, external data source, we have SQL on demand demo, which is pointed to that, and external file format, we have Parquet format. Okay, so these two things which have created on top of it, we created external table. Okay, and we created this final table. So you can see all those options. This is a final table, this is a actual table. So here it's taking so much of time. Yeah, see here, it takes round robin. If you see here, I did not mention, but it's saying that round robin. I give the same thing, right? Why it was giving error? I give same thing underscore. Not sure why it
I
errored out.
think instead of underscore, you given the middle of underscore.
No, I didn't. No, I did not give. Okay, okay, I missed the
Comma.
comma. Okay, my bad. I thought this typo. Yeah. So you can see here this round robin methodology, and here you can see the columns, indexes, everything you can see here. Okay, so here clustered column store index will be created. Okay, so that's how you choose the you create the tables and load the data. So tomorrow we'll see that we'll take fresh file. So I'll import the file in the class, then we'll create this table, and first we will load the data using copy activity that we did not talk about it. Then we will revise again this poly base, and we load the data with CTAS and insert into, and we'll discuss some of the important topics, which option you would choose while creating the table into the target, okay, in the dedicated SQL pool. Okay, so if you have like a large data, fact data, what do? You'll choose the clustered column store index. Okay, and if you are like just a staging table, does not have anything, just you can choose the heap. Okay, so we'll discuss various combinations which we will use in the real time, even for the exam point of view also we'll discuss that. Okay, so these are the important things you need to remember for the polybase. So polybase is a technique which loads the data with the help of the nodes. Okay, and there won't be any involvement of the control node. So that is the reason the data loading takes place a bit faster, and the list of steps will be create external key, create master key, then the database scope credential, external data source, external file format, then the external table, finally create the target table and load the data. And one more thing here, I just took randomly table COVID, but there should not be this should not be the case in the real time. In the real time, actually what do? You'll actually create a schema, then you'll place all the external table in one schema, actual all final tables in another schema, right? So tomorrow we'll create the schema as well, and we'll segregate the data. Okay, any doubts?
Like share the scripts.
Okay, this script, okay, I'll share this same script and upload into that this one cloud.